my water just broke. I felt like things really intensified.
She was right there and she was coming.
It was an amazing feeling.
I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. I could feel her head.
We heard her cry. We were squeezing hands and she was screaming.
I'm Bryn Hunt Palmer, and you're listening to The Birth Hour. This podcast is designed as a safe place to come together and share childbirth stories. Stick around and join us to hear informative and empowering birth journeys from all over the world. If you're new to the Birth Hour, you may not know that we have an online childbirth course that is evidence-based. It includes 12 modules that take you from your final weeks of pregnancy through obviously preparing for birth and then postpartum and feeding your baby as well. And with enrollment in that course, which is called Know Your Options, you'll get free access to our other course called Beyond the First Latch, where we talk all about pumping, feeding baby, storing milk, going back to paid work if that's part of your plan, all of those things as well. Okay, so if you go to thebirthour.com/course, you can see everything laid out in the course, module by module, as well as an FAQ section, which will hopefully answer some of your questions if you have any, things like how to get it covered by an FSA account and things like that. It also talks about the bonuses that come with the course, including bi-monthly Zoom calls and access to our private Facebook group. So again, that's thebirthour.com/course. And you can use the coupon code 100OFF for $100 off enrollment as a podcast listener. We would also love to welcome you into our listener supporter group via Patreon. That's at patreon.com/birthhour. And by becoming a Patreon supporter, you get access to all of our archived episodes. This podcast launched in 2015, so we have over 800 episodes in the archives that are not in the main podcast feed. So you can get your fill of birth stories. And you'll also get access to our private Facebook group for Patreon members, which is a great place to honestly just to search the past posts to get answers to questions, but then of course to ask new questions, find community. It's a really, really great supportive group of people. So I highly recommend joining that. We would love to have you there. We also do monthly Zoom calls with our Patreon supporters, and you get an opportunity to enter your birth story via a different submission form than everyone else uses, and we choose 2 Patreon members each month to share their birth stories. So that is again at patreon.com/birthhour. Today's birth story is with Elena, who's going to be sharing her experience with a partial molar pregnancy loss, followed by a very healing hospital birth. Today's episode is sponsored by Little Spoon. Anyone who's a parent knows feeding decisions are not a one-time thing. You make them again and again as your little one enters new stages and phases. Often the options out there for kids, whether you're feeding a baby, a toddler, or a big kid, don't meet the standards that you want for your child, and you end up compromising on ingredients, nutrition, transparency, even safety. On top of everything else, parents are juggling that constant uncertainty is exhausting. And simply put, families deserve better. That's why I love Little Spoon. It's one trusted place to shop meals and snacks for babies, toddlers, and big kids, all made with real ingredients without having to rethink every choice or lower your standards at each developmental milestone. It shows up at your door and takes one big decision off your plate without compromising on what's important to you. I especially love the foods Little Spoon offers for the toddler stage. Their Biteables are cut-to-size, pinchable meals that make the transition to table food feel easy. They support self-feeding skills and expand your toddler's palate while providing real nutrition at the same time. I also love how easy they are to bring on the go for daycare and caregivers, so you can know that your little one is getting a nutritious meal, even when you're not there, that's been tested for over 500 contaminants, including heavy metals. They also have fun snacks like their puffs, which every toddler I've met absolutely loves, especially when they're teething, and their foods for babies like their baby blends are amazing as well. Feeding your kids doesn't have to be complicated. Little Spoon makes it easy with real nutritionally balanced meals and snacks designed for every stage. It shows up ready to go, takes the pressure off, and somehow still gets devoured, veggies and all. No artificial dyes, flavors, or sweeteners either. And that's a win I'll take every time. Get 30% off your first online order at littlespoon.com/TBH with the code TBH. That's littlespoon.com/TBH with the code TBH for 30% off your first order. All right, now on to today's birth story with Elena. Hi, Elena. Welcome to the Birth Hour. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Hi, Bryn. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about my story.
Awesome. Well, before we get to your story, can you tell listeners a little bit about you and your family?
Sure. So I am currently the very proud mother of one. She just turned 16 months, and I'm now one of those people who counts in months for my baby's age. And I have 2 cats. We live in Boston. Right now, I'm about knee deep in snow. I'm a Georgia transplant, so it's still very novel and exciting to me. And I'm a marketer. My family is small. It's just my daughter and my husband, but we're very happy.
All right. Well, I know you have 2 pregnancy stories to share. So let's start with your first pregnancy, wherever you want to start there.
Yes. So I think it was one of those really typical things where if you haven't experienced a loss before, you think you get pregnant and 9 months later you have the baby. And like so many people before me, I was really surprised to find out that that's not always the case. And actually, it's pretty common that it's not the case. So with my first pregnancy, it ended up being a partial molar pregnancy. I knew nothing about any of this at the time. I still don't know that much about it, but it felt like a super normal pregnancy. We started trying. I got pregnant, I think the 2nd or 3rd month, and I started feeling the really typical symptoms. I was so tired all the time, but again, I knew that was really common. I'm an anxious person, so I was on Reddit. I was on there's Discord bump groups, and I was getting a lot of support and validation for my fears, but none of that helped when we had the 8-week checkup, and they told me that it didn't look like a normal pregnancy. I think the phrase was suspicious of a partial molar pregnancy. And oh my gosh, this happened so long ago, and I'm still really torn up about it.
Yeah.
The hardest thing about that pregnancy was the limbo. And I know anybody who's been through loss will probably have a similar story where we had the appointment on Monday and I went in and, I was prepared for so many things, but I wasn't prepared for that. Like the baby had a heartbeat. It was a good heartbeat. I'd looked up the heartbeat numbers ahead of time. So I was like, okay, I'll know straight away if something's wrong. But I got a weird vibe from the technician and I had a weird feeling. And so when the OB came in and she, asked me how I was feeling, I knew pretty quickly it wasn't going to be the news that I wanted. It turned out that a partial molar pregnancy is something that happens. It's not anything you can prevent. It's not genetic. It's just bad luck, as far as people know. It happens if there's 2 copies of DNA in the sperm and 1 in the egg, so you end up with 3 copies of your chromosomes, which is not a condition that's compatible with life. But we didn't know for sure, and they didn't know for sure, and there was no test we could have done ahead of time, or at the time we would have had to wait until 12 weeks or 16 weeks. And before I got pregnant, 4 weeks sounded like so little time. I was like, I'll just wait a week or a month. But then at the time, sitting in that appointment thinking, I'll have to live in limbo for 4 weeks, not knowing, is this going to end up being a baby or is this going to end up in a horrible loss? Not knowing, with a partial molar, I could have miscarried at any time without warning. And then the doctor said, if you were my daughter, I would have a D&C, and then I would just, if you want to start a family, you want to start the process now to overcome this emotionally and physically. And so, I don't know. I asked for a second opinion. I asked for a third opinion. They all told me the same thing. And then so the Monday was the appointment, and Friday I opted to have a D&C. And I was still so afraid that it wasn't going to be a partial molar, that they'd been wrong. And it was like the 1 in 1,000 chance that actually it was an okay, viable pregnancy. But the doctors were right. We got the test back and it had turned out to be a partial molar. The other hard thing about that was something I had not anticipated, was that the doctors advised me not to try for another baby until 3 months afterwards, or as long as it took for the HCG to clear my system, because there's this complication risk with molars and partial molars, is that it turns into, oh gosh, I can't remember the term for it. It's a kind of cancer. It's not lethal at all. It's not, nobody's ever died from it, but there can be this ongoing complication that requires monitoring and sometimes, in very rare cases, chemotherapy. So they want to make sure that the HCG completely clears your system and that there's no risk of that before you start trying again. So every week I had to go to the doctor's office and get my blood tested and sit in the OBGYN's office looking at all these happy pregnant people and just looking forward for it to be my turn. And that was really hard. It just felt like it would never end. And again, before I was pregnant, 3 months, that's nothing. But
yeah. I know from all the stories I've heard that after a loss, every single month feels like a year,
Just never ending. Yeah. So, and I can look back now, and now that I have my beautiful daughter, 3 months passes when what feels like a blink of the eye. But yeah, at the time it dragged and dragged and dragged. But it ended. It ended. And one thing that really helped was talking to one of the women that was in the group, and she told me that I could ask her anything. And I asked her, when does it get better? When do you stop feeling sad? And she was like, you don't ever really stop feeling sad. It's always going to be a loss. You'll always have had that loss. But she told me about her child that she had at that point. And I don't know, it was so foreign to me. I could have a baby at some point. The idea, I could not get my head around it. But it happened. And so I guess that was something that I would want to pass on to anybody who's in a similar boat is time passes. It does hurt a lot less. And my life is so full right now. I'm so happy.
Yeah.
And and then after the HCG cleared, the doctors gave us the all clear and we started trying for the second time. And this time it stuck.
All right. And how long did it take to get pregnant again?
It took us 3 cycles of trying. So on the 3rd month of trying to conceive, I got pregnant. And I remember my reaction was so different from the first time. The first time I was kind of like the shocked Pikachu gif. Like I was like, oh my God, I had unprotected sex. Now I have a baby. And again, I think this will probably be familiar to anyone who's had a loss. The second time I wanted to be joyful. I wanted to be happy, but all I felt was just so afraid that something bad would happen again. And the first time I was pregnant, the statistics helped me. Like losses are infrequent. It's more common to end up with a baby. But this time, I don't know, it's the partial molar stats. It's like 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000, some people say. And it still happened. That did not protect me from the bad thing from happening. Bad things still happen, even if it's infrequent. So I was just so scared and so nervous, like the whole pregnancy. And I wish, looking back, I wish I could have said like to myself, being sad and anxious and scared didn't protect me from the loss. It didn't protect me the first time, and it wasn't going to protect me the second time. Mm-hmm. And I think if I end up getting pregnant again, I want to try to just be happy and enjoy it. And just, the bad thing can still happen, but being afraid of it won't make it any less likely or any less painful. So the second time, my symptoms, I was on such an eagle eye watch out for the same symptoms just in case the same thing happened again. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I'm fatigued, but not as fatigued. What could it mean? I got morning sickness. So I was like, oh my gosh, looking up the papers on statistics about morning sickness and miscarriage. I'm not a scientist. I did not have any business trying to understand those papers, but there I was anyway. And other than that, I had a pretty symptom-free first trimester, like very straightforward. This was, I don't know, again, I kept expecting a horrible thing to happen, that I would have awful morning sickness or that I would be bleeding all the time. And it was honestly the easiest first trimester I could have asked for. I think I threw up 5 times in total. In the second trimester, one thing that I was a little sad about was I had to give up running. It was just too hard on my joints, like especially my pelvis. That was a shame, but I started walking every day. I listened to a lot of audiobooks and a lot of podcast episodes. And then in the 3rd trimester, I was, again, so irritated by getting heartburn, which I know people deal with it all the time. It's not a big deal, but I'd never had it before. And so I felt it was very rude, fetus to be squishing up my stomach. And what was even more annoying was the advice works, like eat small meals, try not to sit down too much, like don't lean back. But unfortunately, while I was pregnant, I had a huge appetite and I just wanted to eat huge meals and also be reclining and not having small meals and sitting up. So that was a little tough. But all in all, I think the symptoms were, again, super manageable.
That's good. Yeah, heartburn's one of those ones that's like so annoying, especially if you've never had it before. You're like, oh my gosh, I get why there's so many commercials about treating this because it's awful.
Yes.
So uncomfortable.
My husband has heartburn. Like just, I don't know, he just has a wacky digestive system.
Yeah.
He had no sympathy for me, which I was like, okay, come on. I'm carrying a child. You must cater to my every need and feel sorry for me no matter what. He was not on board with that, but he was a great partner and very supportive in every other way. Sympathize enough.
Oh my gosh. So how was the rest of your pregnancy? Anything else you want to share from pregnancy?
I was really proud that I kept walking all the way up until my due date. I think the day that my water broke, I was like in the back putting together a set of Home Depot chairs for my husband. Like I tried really hard to stay active and I was lucky enough that my body let me do that. I liked that I always felt good enough to move, and that really helped me.
Awesome. And then what type of birth were you planning for?
Like a lot of other, I think, first-time moms, I really wanted to have an unmedicated birth. Not because I have anything against an epidural, but I felt like I wanted to know what it was like to go through that process, at least to try. I was open to having an epidural if I started to go into labor and I felt like I needed one, but it was really important to me to start without one and just see how it went. And again, because of my anxiety and because of the loss, and I don't know, I'd read somewhere on the internet, like, if you have an easy pregnancy, you'll have a hard birth, something like that, some kind of random truism that, I don't know, really got into my head. So I was prepared for everything to go pear-shaped. I was reading up on how to advocate for yourself, and I was debating with my husband whether we wanted to shell out for a doula. And in the end, I thought the hospital actually did a really good job of listening to me and letting me do the things that I wanted to do to have the birth that I wanted. And I felt really lucky in that regard. I did end up getting an epidural earlier than I wanted, and the reason was because my water broke. I was very dubious. I had thought my water had broken a couple of days before my due date, and I went in and they were like, no, you're fine. There's no amniotic fluid there. And I had the same feeling a few days later, and I don't know, I just didn't trust myself. I didn't trust my body. I think, again, this is as a result of the loss. I just didn't.
Yeah.
It was really hard for me to know that my body would know what to do and do the right thing. In the end, I was like, well, the worst thing that can happen is that they send me home and we have a little medical bill or a big medical bill. But I'd rather that than the alternative, which is if my water has broken and it's not taken care of, that can end badly. So whatever, we went in. And again, I was like shocked Pikachu face when I was so surprised when the test came back and it was amniotic fluid and my water had broken on my due date, probably as a result of me like trying to do heavy lifting with these freaking Home Depot chairs for my husband's birthday. Once that happened, the clock started and they wanted me to properly go into labor within 24 hours of my water having broken because they were worried about infection happening through the amniotic sac, which had ruptured at that point. So after 24 hours, I had not dilated very much. I think I was maybe at 2 to 3 centimeters. Once I was hooked up to the IV pole, I couldn't get in the tub, which is something that I'd wanted to do to try to help with the labor pain. I don't know for sure if Pitocin does make your contractions stronger or more painful, but they were very strong and they were very painful. And one thing that was really interesting was that they hadn't dialed up the Pitocin hardly at all, and yet my contractions were coming every minute, I think, and they were happening for a very long time, but nothing was happening to my cervix. My body was not progressing. And I didn't know you could do this. They introduced some kind of medical device up into my uterus to see what the Pitocin was doing, like how strong it was in my body. And it turned out that the contractions, although they were happening, the strength was really weak. And this was despite the Pitocin being, like the Pitocin causing contractions really frequently. And so that gave them the permission to whack the Pitocin up to the highest level it would go. And then this really started things rolling. At this point, I was like, please put the epidural in my body right now. The anesthesiologist was there within 10 minutes. I was feeling nothing. And this was about 24 hours after labor had begun, after I'd gone to the hospital because my water had broken. And I think about 6 hours after that, I'd, gotten a little bit of rest. I did the classic thing where the first night we were overnight at the hospital, I wasn't in pain, I wasn't in discomfort, but I was so excited that I didn't sleep. I stayed up the whole night just like, oh my gosh, it could happen any second. And then the second night when I wished I had rest, I was too uncomfortable to really get any sleep. About 6 hours after they cranked up the Pitocin and they saw that my cervix was dilating, I was progressing on a good timeline, I called the nurse because I was like, I feel something weird on my leg. And if you've had an epidural, you'll know, like, if it's done well, you really can't feel that much. I could move my toes, but that was about it. And the nurse came over and looked at me and she said, oh yeah, that's because you're crowning. And it was, I don't know, I reached down and was like, oh my gosh, my daughter's head is right there. I can touch it. That was so, I don't know. Again, I was prepared for bad things to happen. I was ready to have to be wheeled into this, emergency C-section, or not even that that's a bad thing, but just I was ready for things to not go according to plan. Mm-hmm. And they went as much to plan as I could have hoped for, despite the Pitocin and the lack of shower bath tub that I was hoping for. But she crowned, and the doctors had me push on my back, which I was okay with at that point. And within 20 minutes, I think my daughter was born. And the OB actually had me not push at one point and just let the contractions push her out, which I didn't even know that was a thing you could do. And so I didn't push. And I saw in the mirror that I thought I wouldn't want. But then after she crowned, I was like, I need to see what's going on down there. I just saw my body push her out on its own. That was one of the most amazing, magical moments of my life. Just, I guess, kind of realizing my body did know what to do, that I could regain that trust in the way my body worked, and that I could birth my daughter. I didn't have to worry about things going wrong, that things could go right. So that was a really, really beautiful moment for me. And she was born, and she was beautiful. I mean, she was ugly, like a lot of newborns, but I don't know. She was so perfect to me. She is so perfect to me. My husband held her. I noticed right away, my husband has this funny little shape out of his ear, it looks like somebody's taken a bite out of his ear. And it was the first thing I noticed about her, is she has the same little bite mark in her ear. And I was like, I don't know, she's ours. She's yours, she's mine, she's ours. And that was really special. I still can't believe it. She's the most wonderful thing in my life. I know a lot of parents can relate. But yeah, that was the second birth. And it was just really healing after, I don't even know if you can call the D&C a birth, but after delivering the first embryo that way, to have something that was almost exactly what I had hoped for and dreamed for, to deliver my daughter.
Yeah, it sounds beautiful. And that is some fast pushing.
Oh my gosh.
Amazing.
I'd read the horror stories. I was ready to be there for like 5 to 6 hours.
Right. All right. So how was postpartum?
It was really beautiful. I know,
Good.
Again, I was ready for things to go wrong. I'd printed out the warning signs of postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, so my husband would know. But it was really nice. She breastfed really well right off the bat. She slept pretty well from the get-go, which I think those two things really help a lot with postpartum depression and anxiety. I think is like when you're tired, it's just everything is so much harder. My husband had the full 3 months off work as well. We live in Massachusetts that has really good parental leave laws, and his work paid for it, so we weren't worried about that. And that also, I think, it made things so much easier just to have 2 full-time parents at home looking after her for the first 3 months. I had some breakdowns. I don't think they can be avoided for I don't know. It's one of the most challenging things, even if everything goes well and even if everything is easy, having a baby when you're a new parent is so hard. It's the most difficult thing I'd ever done. And I thought I was ready for some things and I really wasn't. Like, I remember there wasn't even anything in particular that set it off. It was just one day I'd fed her, we'd burped her, we tried to play with her and she wouldn't stop crying. And we couldn't figure out what was going wrong. And I felt like somehow this is my fault. Like, I don't know, my milk isn't good enough or something. Mm-hmm. And my husband said, go take a walk. She's still going to be crying, but you don't have to hear it right now. Go take a walk outside. And I went out for 15 minutes and I listened to just some songs and I didn't really think about anything. And I came back and she'd fallen asleep on him. That happened a couple of times where I just needed to get out, but I was so close that I couldn't see that what I needed was space. And I was so grateful to my husband at the time for saying, just go be somewhere else where you don't have to listen to something that at this moment, you can't help her and where you are right now mentally. Yeah. So that was a really nice thing for him to notice, especially when I just couldn't see it myself.
Yeah, I feel like I always tell people, like, if someone's offering to like come help hold a baby, it's like, do the witching hour because sometimes there's nothing that even mom can do to soothe the baby. So you might as well rest and let someone else do it.
Exactly. And you're right. I can't believe I'd forgotten. It was the witching hour. It's amazing. This was a year ago now that she was that age. It was always like 5 to 8 p.m. that she would get really frantic.
Yeah. Right when you just want to like have dinner and get ready for bed.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad it worked out for y'all.
Yeah, definitely.
Sounds like you were a good team.
Again, this was one of the things that I was ready for things to go wrong. I was ready for my relationship with my husband to fall apart because having a baby is hard. It didn't. I loved and love seeing him as a father. I loved seeing him just in a new light as a husband and as a partner to me. It really felt like I saw him step up in a way that I don't know. Again, I was ready for things to go wrong and they went right. And I love him. It sounds so corny. I love him now more than I've ever done before because I've gotten to see this new side of him in a dad to our daughter and in a partner to me, just the way that he's changed.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for sharing your story. Any resources you want to share?
I cannot recommend the bumps groups enough. So if you are looking for community and you don't have local community nearby, go on Reddit, try to find your bumps group. So it'll be a group of people who are going to have a baby in the same month that you're due. And there are so many tips and tricks and I don't know, just experiences shared, learned from the parents in that group. I don't know, just anything from like a water bottle brand, now that our babies are drinking water, to commiserating about the witching hour. It's like, you're not doing anything wrong. Babies are just like that. I've been talked down from many a ledge by the incredible people in my bump group, and I can't recommend them enough to anybody who's looking for online community if you're living far away from your village. Like my husband and my husband's parents and my parents live overseas in Europe, and we've recently moved to Boston. So it was really great for me to have that kind of support when we didn't have it locally.
Awesome. All right. And where's the best place for people to connect with you?
My email address, elenaeruiz95@gmail.com. I am always open to talk about this experience. I know termination for medical reasons can be a really touchy subject, but it's something I believe every person should have the right to do, to have the right to making those decisions about their own body. And if anybody wants to ask about managing anxiety in a pregnancy after loss, that's something I also am more than happy to talk about at any point.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. We'll definitely put that on the show notes so people can reach out. Yeah. Just thank you again for sharing your story.
Thank you so much, Bryn.
Thank you so much again to Elena for sharing her stories with us and to Little Spoon for sponsoring this episode. Remember, you can go to littlespoon.com/TBH and use the code TBH for 30% off your first order. I will link to that from the podcast app where you're listening to this episode, as well as on the show notes. To find the show notes, you can go to thebirthhour.com and search for Elena's name in the search bar.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, head to thebirthhour.com and click Become a Member to pledge your support. And as a thank you, you'll get an invitation to join our private Facebook group and access to exclusive episodes. Your vote of confidence and support means the world to me.